I remember he gave me the article of Larry Hartzell's book, the Intro to JKD book by Larry Hartzell.
Yeah.
And the intro is written by Guru. And at the time, I don't really know who Guru is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, guess how he referred to Guru? He goes, this guy is the future of martial arts. This is where martial arts is going to go. So you need to pay attention to who this guy is. That's how he said to me. And I'm thinking, okay, all right.
Yes, sir.
I don't even have a driver's license at this point, right? I'm just happy that I had a black belt in Taekwondo.
All right, my name is Jamie Sparling. Welcome to the FormABLE Podcast, where we talk about formable moments in martial arts training as well as formable moments in the lives of martial artists. Today I have Matt Stumpf. He is here from St. Louis, where his group is called Applied Combative Group of St. Louis. He does Filipino martial arts, Jeet Kune Do. I've had the privilege of being in the room, learning from Guru Inasano with him, and I'm just super excited to have him on the show. How's life treating you today, Matt?
It's treating me really well, sir. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Just got done doing some no-gi, so I'm excited to come in here and talk FMA with everybody.
Right on. So you just got done doing some jiu-jitsu? Is that what I heard?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I cross-trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at Gracie Maida in St. Louis. It's an awesome group, so it's also been very formative for me to be cross-training as well. And working with that group has also it's just been a fantastic experience. So I just love martial arts all over. So it's great to do anything I can be doing, I love.
Yeah, we can always tell when we're around you. My wife wanted me to let you know that one of the formable martial arts moments for her was being in a seminar and having you and your wife or your partner come up and do martial arts and do the double stick. And my wife wanted me to tell you that she looked at that and she was like, I aspire to be that with my husband.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, being able to work with Jen and learn and teach and share martial arts along with her has been a fantastic experience for myself also. Yeah. So I've really, really enjoyed that. And thanks so much for that shout out. That's really great. I'll pass that along. Jen put a lot too.
Oh, for sure. My wife made me make sure that I told you. So yeah, I had to get
it.
Usually I wait to the very end, but I'm gonna forget. So I got to make sure I get that in. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
Matt.
Yes.
You work in the school district with kiddos with special needs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Currently, I'm the in-school suspension teacher for my school, but I had been working, and I was put in that role to essentially address office referrals and school referrals. And I still brought Filipino martial arts into that role as well. I started doing Filipino martial arts in the school. So let me backtrack a second.
Yeah.
My 16th year in education as my career. Most of those years have been a special ed teacher. And I found that going back even farther, I began my special education career actually as a special education student. So I was a student who was identified with learning targets. And so I had an IEP in school and spent a lot of my time in special ed settings. So I was kind of familiar with that. And then I started as a para, which is like an assistant to a special ed teacher in 2007, I think, 2006, 2007. And I noticed that a lot of kids had crossing the midline issues. So things like tying their shoes, or if they wrote on the board, they could get to a certain part and then they would struggle a second to go past. So I noticed that like crossing midline was a huge struggle. And so when I started teaching special ed, I was always obviously training with Guru and Asano as well. So, my routines, especially on my weekends, used to be work till Friday, get off work on Friday, travel someplace to see Guru, train, have a blast, travel back Sunday night, wake up and start my work week. And something clicked in me in about my 10th year. I was watching some of Paul McCartney's from his Cognitive College stuff.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, and I watched some of his TED Talks and some of his things.
Me too.
And Yeah, and it was super great, inspiring, because on there, he does a breakdown of how the brain functions and how we have different parts of our brain focus on things. And I noticed that a lot of children who struggle, and I don't even really like the term struggle, because I think everybody's got something going on with them. And I think that what happens with a lot of kids is they're either dealing with their own personal trauma, they've got their own biochemistry that's working, and that might make them anxious or antsy or upset for whatever reason. It's hard for them to focus. And so we usually kind of tell ourselves the story that the quiet kid is the one who's working, right?
Yeah.
The quiet kid is the one who's learning. That's the best kid. But sometimes those kids that are a little bit off the wall, outside the box thinkers, those are some of your best kids. So anyway, I had the opportunity about 10 years ago to start teaching self-contained again at the middle school level. Tried introducing just Sinawali as a practice. And what I started to do was use pool noodles, and I would have the kids do Heaven 6. And we started working on just getting the kids cooperatively to do that. And this was pre-COVID. So there's obviously a couple things that goes on in the story. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit.
No,
but
you're good. I'm following.
What ended up happening was, as I started making a commitment that we would do it a minute a day, I noticed that a lot of behaviors and social interactions with the kids seemed to improve. So what I noticed was, if they did Heaven 6 for a minute a day, and we would do a minute and would try to work to the goal of not speaking to each other, not saying anything, working on our breathing while we're doing that binary rhythmic motion, really committing to doing it for a minute. There's something about that made transitions, classes easier, made independent concentration go up a little higher. And I noticed the kids were kind of nicer to each other, because the thing about Filipino martial arts is it's different than, let's just say, karate. And I'm a big Taekwondo guy. I started doing Taekwondo when I was a kid, in boxing. And you can Taekwondo forms on your own. So you can, on your own, you can go up and say, hey, I'm going to practice my kata or my form by myself. But in Filipino martial arts, you really need another partner. You can do some solo stuff, but you really need that person giving you that rhythm back and forth. And so what I noticed, what was fascinating for me to see, was when the children would start to teach each other, we had to kind of have like little mini conferences and tell them stuff like, hey, if you're a little bit nicer, you're a little more encouraging, this is going to help that other kid learn this. And it was interesting to kind of watch them regulate themselves. It was a really cool privilege to see. Yeah. So I did that. So that was my first experience with it. And I said, hey, there's something there. There's something here. Okay. Well, then what was really inspiring, what was really cool for me was, how every time you write, every time you have to re-up with Guru, you got to write letters.
Yes.
Right.
Intentions,
what you're doing. So I kind of put a little blip in there. I re-up and I put a little blip in there. I go, hey, Guru, just so you know, I'm teaching, 8th grade, special ed. I'm putting this in there. And I saw him in July of that year. I think it was July 2018 at Pat Trey's school in Virginia. And he saw me and he's like, hey, how's that going? Like, he actually remembered that I did it. And that gave me a little bit of the push. Like, all right, he actually notices this and the kids really like it. Seems like it's going to fit. So I'm going to do it again. Well, I kept introducing it the next year. And then what happened was, we did this thing in our school called Pick Your Passion. And the kids didn't know what they were doing. And I think I called it sensory. I think I called it like sensory strengthening or something. And so I'm calling it sensory strengthening. And these kids sign up for the class. They don't know what it is. And what was interesting was the kids started really liking it. And I would kind of explain to them who Guru was and explain to them what Filipino martial arts was and how this was helping their coordination. And I had kids from a variety of backgrounds that really started to take to it, because I think they enjoyed the rhythm of it. And there's a little bit of expression, especially when I show them, hey, when you go down the line this way, you can go up the line the other way. So we have down, we have up. You guys can mix these patterns up. I remember a kid one time, it was so fascinating to me. I had a kid tell me this is what I learned. I told Guru the story, and he really, I thought he liked it, so I thought it was kind of neat. Was that I had one kid who had some trauma in their background, so they didn't want to do it with me. They go, I don't want to do it. I just want to watch. And I said, that's fine. You can, you just want to watch. And the child was relatively behaved. And then one day, this kid just gets up and he can do Heaven's Sakes. I sat there and do Heaven's Sakes and did it really good. And I go, how'd you learn to do that? And he goes, I just watched you. He goes, I watched and I followed the directions. And he goes, and I went like this, Mr. Stumpf, and I just went forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand. And it was kind of neat. It was kind of neat to see him pick up. So that was my first real pickup. And then after the pandemic, my principal made a schedule change, which was very much like an education experience where I'm walking in. I don't know what my schedule is going to be. So I got kids in like 3 days. I had to prep. And I look at a schedule, it says adaptive PE. And I'm like, adaptive PE? Like special ed PE? My principal's like, yeah, you can do that. And I thought, well, here we go.
Fair enough.
So the first thing I do is I meet my kids, and I get about 8 or 9 kids in an adaptive PE class with a range of educational identifications. So I had some kids with identifications of Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I had some with autism and things like that. And so I was kind of looking at their goals, looking at their IEP goals, and some of them had a lot of movement and sensory-based things as goals. And I thought, well, this is perfect for them. So I just introduced a Sinawali unit. I said, and I let the kids pick. I always let the kids pick because it's really important in education that children, I think, regardless of their educational identification or IQ, wherever they're at, it's very important that they have a choice and a voice in their education and where they're going. So every unit, we would say, okay, do you guys want to work on basketball? I go, or do you guys want to work on some Sinawali? And they would switch up. They would switch up between soccer. We did track and stuff like that, but they would almost always do the Sinawali with me. And I had some really good paras. I had some really good support because at first I thought, I don't know if these paras are going to want to do this with me. And all of my not all, most of my paras went and did it with me. My first one was a woman named Chris, and she was just fantastic in special education. And she, to her credit, she committed to sitting down and learning it. And I did not think she was going to want to do it. And she sat there and she learned it, and she did it with every kid that came in. So it was really cool. Yeah.
It's fascinating to think, like, who gets what, right? And who are the students that are going to stick around and really become interested, because it's usually not 100% what we think, at least in my experience. Sometimes I'm talking to my wife and I'm just like, I know they're really into it, but sometimes those are the folks that drop off, and the person who's over in the corner who's quiet might stick around and, like you said, might go home and practice.
I've been wrong about so many people.
Me too.
I'm more wrong about more than what I'm right about. And what I kind of find when I start teaching people, and really, and I don't even really like the term teach. I like to think of myself in my own school, in my classes, as kind of the lead student, because I learn more from Khalid now than I did from Khalid even 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm learning more every day. And I start to find, if you stick around and you start asking kind of people what drew them in and what kept them there, I think you find with a lot of Filipino martial arts, there's a lot of self-expression there that's important, but people start to kind of have their own stories. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they had to have a very traumatic Batman story, but usually somewhere in someone's background, either their confidence got taken from them, or they started being told that they couldn't do sports, they couldn't do certain things. And so then they kind of get that challenge, and they get that why, and they get that drive. And it's something that I think about all the time, where the belts are important. The belts are important, but I have learned more, I think, helping other people learn this, and I've learned more almost as a white belt in a lot of ways. Guru always talks about the white belt mentality, right? And you learn more sometimes from your failures and things you don't get, right? And it almost takes more strength to not achieve something and show up and keep trying. That's kind of how I think, you know.
Well,
you
yeah,
know.
that makes sense. And I mean, one of the gifts that martial arts gives us is the ability just to all of a sudden, I'll try other things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because if you'll try something where there is a small percentage of risk of harm, then all of a sudden the other thing doesn't seem like that big of an ordeal. And especially with kiddos, I think that that's so important, and adults as well.
Absolutely. I think the need for physical confidence in anything is incredibly hard, and I think that need is more apparent now today, I think, than any other time in our history. I feel like.
Yeah.
And I remember Guru talking about how you only need one that works, or you only need two or three techniques. And I remind myself, like today, when I'm rolling in jujitsu, and I remind myself I usually have about one or two passes I can do, and then I go try to work on a new pass, and I see the pass, and I throw the pass on. Okay, this is so simple. Like my professor J.W. Wright is a fantastic jiu-jitsu guy. The guy's phenomenal, and he was showing me this a way to set up a knee cutter pass, and I go, that looks so. I go home, I practice, and I get a couple of my friends. I'm like, hey, Shane, let's work through this. I'm good to go. And I'm thinking, today's the day. I'm going to do this. No, it's not. And not only do you not get it, you get swept, and you think to yourself, okay, but you learn from that. Instead of trying to get the one I'm good at, I try to get a new one, right? And so when Guru talks about the disarms, you realize, we approach training thinking, oh, well, we're going to do all these things. Well, no, you got to learn to develop it for yourself, and you got to fit it to your body. You got to fit it to your training partners, and you got to fit it to the context. And all of those things are a challenge, And I learned a lot from bringing Filipino martial arts into my classrooms. Because I got to modify it, because you always get kids that are like, what's this for? What do I want to do this? Or like, I don't want to answer a question to a parent of, was my child learning to stick fight in your class? Like, you don't want to say, right? I mean,
yes.
These could be potentially problem questions. And so what I always tell the kids is, I say, you benefit from trying new things. You also benefit when your world grows, and doing these kinds of things makes the world grow. And so then when I started doing it, when I taught 8th grade science 3 years ago, and I had and this is where you never can tell what's gonna work. And I had a group of kids that I thought, I don't know if they're gonna really be into it. My academic lab kids, because that's kind of the environment that you want to take it in. And so I said, hey, would you guys be willing to try this? And I show it to them. And I show them some film of Sinawali. And none of them had an expression one way or the other.
Really?
They didn't have they didn't have any kind of expression. They just kind of looked. And I remember one of the girls looks and she goes, okay, she goes, I'll do it, but she goes, I don't want you to grade me on it. And I said, that's fine, I'm not gonna grade you. And so
that's legit.
Yeah, but what was interesting was, and this is where I was real proud of this moment as an educator, was that every time we got a new student into the ACT Lab, that they always wanted to teach the new kid. They didn't want me to teach. And I found that to be a very empowering kind of thing for young people, was that whenever we'd get a new kid that would join the class, that they'd want to share it with that kid. Like, hey, the Mr. Stumpf's ACT Lab, we all know how to do this thing. And the kid would go, well, what is it? And they're like, well, we got to show it to you. You can't describe it. And then the kid's like, well, what's he going to do? And they're like, he's not going to do anything. We're going to teach you. And it became like this like almost like Guru uses the term passage of rites, but it was almost like this rite of passage that would start to occur. And what was interesting, a real special privilege for me to experience, was that a lot of the kids would ask me to do it because at some point you don't know if you're pushing it too much on a kid. You don't want to push them too hard, And so what ended up happening was a lot of the kids would ask me to do it with them. If I gave them a little bit of time off, they'd come in there, hey, Mr. Stumpf, can we do this for a minute? Because sometimes it gives them a little bit of a mental escape. It gives them a calming, a self-regulating exercise. I would work on a lot of like real deep breathing. That's something that I got from Guru Lanero. I've had the privilege of working with him several times. And Guru Lanero really opened my mind up to breathing and the importance of deep breathing and examining that. And the first time he taught me, and I don't feel bad saying this, I think he knew. The first time he showed me, I'm like, this is the stupidest thing. I'm like, I can't believe we're sitting here doing this. Like, and I almost like falling asleep, rolling my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, I do not like this. But then I always remind myself, just as you gotta try new things, you gotta look at, what's the example that the guy from the Dallas Cowboys that wanted to bring in Guru and Larry Hartsell to teach six. Probably a lot of the offensive defensive linemen probably had a similar attitude, right?
I'm sure.
So I thought to myself, no, you got to do it. And then when I started to notice was when I controlled my breathing, I was responding to people more, reacting less.
Mm-hmm.
When controlling my breathing, all of a sudden I'm in bottom side control, and I'm like, I can relax for a second, frame off of this, and I can find a solution out of this. I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I noticed like the more I control my breathing, the more I'm able to kind of remove myself and take a step back. And so I thought to myself, a lot of kids, especially when you look at discipline in the public schools, it happens because children and adults too, we're spending a lot of time communicating to each other through text, emails, phone calls. So we're not able to interpret the nonverbals. And what practice Sinawali does is if you're quiet, you can still work on the nonverbals. You can kind of still see where people are, and it gives you an opportunity to work on things that way. And so what I started doing is I started taking some of the stuff I'm learning from Guru Lanero about breathing practice, and I looked up some stuff myself. And I go, okay, I'm gonna work on this. And what I noticed was that group of kids would come back and they'd tell me, they go, man, that really helped. They would even tell me, they go, man, Mr. Stumpf, I remember a kid coming in, she goes, man, Mr. Stumpf, I got so mad at my mom last night and I was gonna fly off the handle. And I go, what? She goes, and I did this thing that you talked about doing where I just pushed my stomach and I breathed from my stomach and I told myself I wasn't gonna yell. And I thought, oh, that's a good thing, right? So the point I'm making is like I almost look at Sinawali, especially when we start looking at the practice of mindfulness and we start looking at the practice of how it can serve others. We always look at the very clear combative application. They're 100% valid and needed, and I love sharing those things with people. But I think there's also it's almost like a deeper level of self-care and mental fortitude that you just develop from practicing. And then it becomes kind of like soup where I can just throw something in there. Maybe I want maybe I want to put jalapenos in it. Maybe I want to put onions. Maybe I want to leave something out.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, now that I got the kids doing Sinawali, now we're going to work on the breathing with the Sinawali. And I started doing that with kids, and I got a lot of real positive feedback. Because I always feel like students are the people that were there to service, right? We're there to serve the kid. And so, my opinion is if a kid comes back and they tell me something 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, and hey, this really helped, and it helped make me a better person. It helped me get a job, navigate a class, work with people I don't like, whatever that obstacle is, specifically breathing and a tactile skill like that. I think that's one of the highest compliments. So I kind of enjoy Kali being like that for me.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't always have to be about the other thing. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't always have to be about the obvious.
For sure. For sure. I love Kali because I was never athletic. And I was overweight in high school, and I didn't want to do gym class and whatever. And I wanted to do martial arts my whole life.
Yeah.
And my first guru put sticks in my hands, and next thing I know, I could feel, right, a little bit of the flow, right? I feel like I'm dancing now. Now it looks ridiculous, but at the same time, it taught me how to move my body. And I 100% I believe, and I think it's fascinating about the breathing. One day I'm going to pick your brain about breathing with the Sinawali. That's something I want to definitely play with because as you said, as we service young people and affinity martial arts, and for you both in your group as well as in the public school, um, what we're really teaching people isn't necessarily martial arts.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're taking with them.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that breathing piece is super, super important.
Yeah, I think it's important too because you learn that when you're doing physical things with people, you're seeing people at their best and you're seeing them at their worst.
Yes.
And you build confidence, like real confidence. You build when you can't do something. You want to learn how to do it. You practice it, and then you can execute it. And that's the first level of the confidence. But then the next level of confidence, I think, comes from when you want to get a deeper understanding of that thing. It's like, Guru Asano talks that there's 4,096 different Sinawalis when you start playing with the numbers. But if you notice, he never goes, here's Sinawali 1 and 2. We don't
Mm-hmm.
ever do that. And then when you start to mix with the numbers and you start to go, well, now I'm going to play with 3. Do 3 on one side, 1 on the other, 4 count. And then maybe you do 4 on one side, 3 on the other to return. Now you got a 7 count, right?
Yeah.
And then systems like Villabreo is very famous for its 8 count, right? And then you get Sinawali systems like Estalelia, where it's taken it, 5 is very unique because it ends with a double with an under movement, right? And so then each one of those teaches you something different. So then your confidence, in my opinion, gains when you can take another person and teach them something and it actually means something to them, because then it's valuable.
Yes.
It's valuable, and it's not me showing you my baseball card collection and going, hey, check this out, this is really cool. Yeah, that's one thing, but the bigger confidence comes from, hey, let me show you how to develop this for yourself.
Yeah.
Let me put this in the context for you, and then you start doing that. That's when I think like we all really start to grow.
Brother, you just made so much sense to me.
Oh,
One of the things that we were just doing at class earlier is in about 30 minutes we went through all 8 6 counts.
awesome.
And when I first started, trying to learn one at a time, right? Because you travel to see Guru and then you come back and you try to
Yep.
learn one, right? And then eventually what happens, at least for me, is that I thought I had 5, and turns out I really only had 3, and then I had a couple that I made up myself, right? Uh,
We've
and
all done that one. And
yeah,
you think
brother.
you're the one that admitted it, like nobody has ever done this one but me. This person that figured out that you can use the number 4.
Yeah,
Everyone else went to 6, but not me.
yeah. Think yourself a genius, right? We have our moments, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But as we were going through the 8 counts, I remember thinking to myself that they were all different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which they are, but they're all so similar,
Right.
right? And so when I was looking at the differences, I was screwing myself up. So today I just wanted everybody in class to see the similarities. And that's how we wrote out all of the different 8 counts today based on the similarities. You know what I mean? Uh,
Uh,
well, because
yeah.
for so long I was lost trying to do it. And
Yeah,
now if I
absolutely.
ask them, do they know all the 8 counts? They're like, well, no, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Trust me, you have a better idea than you think.
And when you look at how the 8 counts are broken down, to
Oh,
me,
I meant 6 counts for the
there's
love of God.
well, you meant the 8 6 counts, but when you look at like Sinawali number 1,
Mm-hmm.
Sinawali number 1, and then Sinawali number 5 are mirrors of each other because you have all
Yes.
4 hands on one, all backing on the other. Then you have Sinawali number 2, and then when you look at Sinawali number 7, they're similar too because you have 2 forehands and there's a backhand interrupting them. Then when you look at Sinawali number 3 with I think 8 and Sinawali 6, now you've got 2 backhands interrupted by a forehand, and then you've got Sinawali number 4, which is my favorite, the forehand backhand forehand series.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a family in and of itself, and I love how you describe that, because
Thank you.
just look to do it like that, you have to work in your knowledge of what ticks, lap ticks. I remember teaching my ACT lab, the forehand series. And I had a kid tell me that it helped her in her basketball game. And she said, I remembered the high-low. She's talking about, she goes, man, this is really neat. And it's to me, I think it's that real special experience when you get to share that with somebody that's not necessarily a Filipino martial artist, but they see the value, shows you the level of trust that they have with you. And it also shows you the level of commitment that they have to self-improvement, I think, which is why working with kids is so cool, because I really do think the kids want to have good days at school. They want to have good days with their teachers. And so then when you offer something that's like kind of outside the box like that, it's really special, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then when you have adults that are taking time out of their day, they could be at home watching Netflix, or they could be watching, something on TV. They say, hey, I find a value in doing this. That's really important. I think that's super special.
Absolutely. And the very fact that they take their time out of their day to come, right? And then I remember having Kent Nelson on the show, and he brought up,
awesome.
he
Kent's
Kent.
great.
He is great.
Yeah.
But he had brought up the fact that, well, for every adult that you have in your class, you also need to acknowledge the fact that they might have drove 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. So every time, for every hour on the mat, that's 2 hours out of their life. And
that's right.
It's true, right? And that hit me hard. And I looked at my students a little bit differently that time, because, sometimes you get used to just going in an ebb and flow. So
I always, I kind of remind myself, and I love that Kent said it like that, because I had a kid one time that their parent came in to conferences, and they had to take a day off of work to come see me and talk to conferences. And I tried to make that very, very positive. And one of the teachers, when I left the building, she made a comment, and she goes, "You're always so nice. And why are you always so nice?" And I said, well, because that parent that you just met had to take a day off of work and had to take an Uber up here. And I said, if you don't respect what people the time that they're spending and the money that they're spending to get up there, it just, you kind of lose something.
Yeah.
You have to, I appreciated that. I think they said Michael Jordan used to comment that when people were playing, that when he was playing, he understood that there was somebody who was seeing him for the first time, and there was somebody who had spent a lot of money that maybe they didn't have to go see him. Mm-hmm. And so he was going to give that absolute best commitment. And I always kind of remind myself that I think, especially with adult students, a lot of them are there for growth, even if they know it or not. I've had a lot of students share with me their whys, which is really special. Mm-hmm. And I always remind myself that I'm the person that they're trusting with their growth too. And I can't help them grow if I'm not trying to grow myself. Yeah, bro. Which is my commitment to training and working on things. And then also, I can't help them grow if I'm not grateful for that experience myself. I think I love how Kent said that. That's really cool.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, I try to acknowledge it, but that hit me hard and everything. And I try to remember that piece. So, brother, when did you start martial arts? I guess now we'll start at the beginning. Let's do something different. You know what I mean? I'm all over the place, as are you, my brother.
Like, when did I start?
Yeah, you said you started with Taekwondo?
Yeah, I started with Taekwondo and boxing. I was kind of, my story with that's kind of unique. I had a very unique experience in education in public schools, and wasn't particularly a good student. Was definitely subjected to the stereotypical bullying I think that some kids experience in the late 80s, early 90s. It was kind of my experience, and so I got involved in a Taekwondo program called American Martial Arts, and the owner of that was Sean Becker. And he was a really neat guy because he was into cross training before I knew what that was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he would train boxers and fighters out of the gym, and he would work on Taekwondo, but then he'd also work on boxing. And I don't really know, if that makes sense. So I don't really know what's good and what's not. I'm just doing what he said, and I'm competing, and I started working that program, and it was neat because you'd come in there and it was a Taekwondo program. And so he told people it was Taekwondo, but then we're like, running miles, we're jumping rope, we're hitting speed bags, we're doing double in bags, right? So we're doing all these kind of unique training things. I'm thinking, oh well, this is Taekwondo. What it
Right.
really was Western boxing. And then he would still teach us the Taekwondo form. So he was really into cross training. He really appreciated that. So my first introduction to Guru actually came from Sean. And what he would do, and Sean was an interesting guy because when he passed away in 1995. I was 17, and so he passed away. I found a bunch of his old stuff that he had in his office, and he had articles about Customata and Mike Tyson, and he had books on Aikido and Judo. So you could tell he really found the value in cross training. But when I got my black belt, I remember he gave me the article of Larry Hartzell's book, the Intro to JKD book by Larry Hartzell.
Yeah.
And the intro is written by Guru. And at the time, I don't really know who Guru is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, guess how he referred to Guru? He goes, this guy is the future of martial arts. This is where martial arts is going to go. So you need to pay attention to who this guy is. That's how he said to me. And I'm thinking, okay, all right.
Yes, sir.
I don't even have a driver's license at this point, right? I'm just happy that I had a black belt in Taekwondo. So what ended up happening is Sean ended up passing away, and I ended up continuing his school for about, I think I continued his school for about 4 years.
Wow.
After he passed.
Good
and then I'm sorry.
Good for you. That's great.
Oh, thank you. Did that. And I was able to train with Guru for the first time in '96. And he came to St. Louis, and I found the ad in the back of a black belt magazine. And I remember thinking, Dan and Asano's coming to St. Louis. How lucky am I? Kind of thing. And I show up to the seminar, and I remember not even being able to do Heaven 6 in the seminar. And my partner left me. He went to the bathroom, came in through a different door, and then was partners with a different group. And I'm standing there with my sticks going, okay, I guess I'm really bad at this, right? Yeah, exactly. And I remember being there at that seminar and seeing, I saw Mark McFan for the first time. That he scared the heck out of me. Mark McFan came up, showed me how to trap or something, and I thought I was gonna pee on myself. That's how I slapped my arm. And at the time, it's very, very humbling because as a young person, I had competed in a lot of adult divisions and was very successful.
Mm-hmm.
To be in an environment like Guru's for the first time at 18, I saw the depth of what he was offering. And Damon Caro was his assistant, and I was watching this stuff. But I wasn't able to do it for a while because there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities to train at that time period in the area. So then I ended up doing Bujinkan, Budo Taijutsu. So I did that for a number of years, and I studied that, which was a lot of fun. And then I ended up finding my way back into Guru's work in around 2005. 2004, 2005, I think I started traveling to see him again. And I started going down to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that was Eric Jensen's school at the time period. So I'd go down there and I would go to Eric Jensen's school twice a year and see Guru, and I'd come back up. And then Guru would come to St. Louis, and so with me and some of my friends that we started doing ACG, that group, we all started kind of traveling together and seeing Guru in different seminars. And so then we just kind of built up momentum, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah. That's amazing. And, I think that happens to everybody. I literally, when I was laughing, I was thinking, I am pretty sure that somebody ran off on me during one of my first seminars. I mean, literally, I was standing there with 2 sticks. By the time I had left from seeing Guru the first time, all I knew was there was this thing called the San Miguel that someday I might learn, and that there was a Pak Sao and a BOG. And that's all I knew. And then I just stood there like.
I remember driving back with somebody. I remember learning Sinawali, learning the 8th Sinawali. And at the time, the way we would teach, and I remember I tell this to my students all the time, you guys don't know how lucky you are because you get to learn good quality colleagues. At the time, we'd go, we're going to do Heaven 6 on the right side, but then we're going to go forehand back and forehand on the left. And that might have been the class.
Yeah.
Because it was very complex. And so then what ends up happening, I remember we were down in Oklahoma, and one of my training partners, Chris, was driving back, and I'm sitting there going, backhand, forehand, backhand, now backhand with the right, forehand, backhand again, backhand left. And I'm sitting there just doing it over and over, and Chris is laughing at me, having a grand old time. Because it was great. It was a really good time. It was really cool. There's something almost innocent about it. It's almost like childhood almost again in a way,
Totally.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes jokingly, I feel like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber. When all of a sudden, like, Mike could start, we're really doing it, Harry. You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden, it's like it's working. And then by the time I, could call, I'd be like, I think I lost it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right? And the only way not to lose it is, like, continue. I could see it in the car.
And you find that you learn a lot from that process. Mm-hmm. And it was really special because when you make a commitment to yourself to just hang in there, just keep doing it, it's a really special transformation that starts to occur because you start building trust in yourself because you say, okay, I know what he's about to do. I know what this is. I've seen it 50 times and 49 times I screwed it up. This is going to be a time I'm going to get it. And you might mess it up on the 50th time. That's okay. You might mess it up because you realize that as you're learning, even if you're making mistakes, if you're intentionally trying to fix it, there's a part of you that starts to ingrain with it. Mm-hmm. So obviously I started doing that with Guru and studying Kali, JKD, and CLAT. And then 6 years ago, I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I started working on that with J.W. Wright at Gracie United in St. Louis. And that has just been a phenomenal experience. So I very recently just got my purple belt, which was probably one of my favorite achievements because I did not think I could do it. And I tell that to my students all the time because I was working with somebody the other day, and he said, man, I don't think I can get this thing that you want me to do. And we were working on good teams. It was hard. We were working on, forehand, backhand with that classic Okasa beat with the left. And he said, I just don't think I can pick it up. And I told him, I said, do you know how many times I thought about quitting jiu-jitsu? And he said, well, you probably never thought about quitting. I said, I thought about quitting all the time. But yeah, because it's hard. Because you go in there, and I remember my first class, and I was so excited. I'm wearing my white belt, and I got this new gi on. And my professor gets up there, and he shows a sit-up sweep. And I'm like, that looks so cool. I want to be able to do a sit-up sweep. And I go to do the sit-up sweep. I'm like, okay, I'm doing the sit-up sweep. And my partner looks at me. We're about to roll. And he goes, now, here's what's going to happen. This is when you know that you're working with somebody, and the guy's out of your league, but you don't know it yet. Yeah. He goes, here's what's about to occur. He goes, we're gonna slap hands and make grips. And I go, okay, yes, sir. He goes, and when you've had enough, you just tap my body. I said, okay, I can do that. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna do something. I didn't do anything. I went flat on my back. The next thing I know, he's got me in some kind of choke, and I tapped. And I went, oh, okay, that was quick. I'll look up at the clock. 5 minutes and 30 seconds are left on the clock. And this cycle repeated itself several times. And I thought, man, how cool is this? And now I get to retool. And I remember taking a class at Guru's Academy with John Jack Machado, and Guru was there, and he made a comment to me. He goes, oh, well, how about that? You got your blue belt. And he kind of and it was like a laugh. He goes, you stuck with it. And he didn't make a comment and this is where I really appreciated him. He didn't make a comment one thing or the other. He just said, you stuck with it. That's great. Because it takes a lot of courage to stick with something, And I got a green belt. I have a green belt in judo, and I've been practicing judo for 2 years now. I've only been doing judo for 2 years. And my sensei in judo, Blair Watts, is just a very classy, very, very classy martial art instructor. It brings in a lot of experience. And I remember thinking I'm too old for this because I'm about 45 at the time. I'm 47 now. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I should be doing this. And it's almost like, and this is where he's a good instructor, I think he sensed that I was insecure about getting hurt. And he looked at me and he said, if you show up and you don't train stupid, you're going to get this. He goes, you'll be okay. He goes, think about the grips, think about your hips, and you're going to be okay. And that ended up being such a great experience for me working with him. And I'm just, I'm just proud of that. I'm proud that I stuck with it. I remember what Guru said. He said, hey, you stuck with it. You kept going. You could have quit and you did it. And that's a great thing to be able to say.
Yeah, brother, I feel the same way. I just recently got my purple belt too. And
congratulations.
Thank you, brother.
Feels good, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And there's still moments at the end of the day where I'm trying to do something and I eat the big crap sandwich and I'm like, oh man, I don't know.
Yeah, that happened today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try this move. I tried it.
Yeah.
You know what's fun about that too is when I got my purple belt, I was incredibly emotional about it because I didn't think I was gonna get. And I remembered the first week when you're learning kind of how the hierarchy of jiu-jitsu goes, because, they say purple belt's kind of the start of the elite ranks. And I'm looking around and I'm looking at all the purple belts and I know that I'm low man on the totem pole. And I'm like, man, everybody with a blue belt beats the brakes off me. I can't do anything to these guys. And I hadn't rolled with a purple belt yet, right? And then I rolled with my first purple belt that week, and I'll spare you the details, but I think you know what the outcome was.
Sure.
And I remember sitting back against the mats, and I go, man, I don't think I'll ever be a blue belt, let alone a purple belt. Because you start to see the distinctions in the ranks and the traps that they can set. And what's so fun for me to engage in is the traps that they are able to set where you think you're passing, like, okay, I was just setting up a pass today, and the gentleman I was rolling with a very deep in a brown belt, and I set up the pass and I got it, and we're fighting. I'm like, oh, I think I got it, hips flat, got control, and I go for it. I'm like, I'm passing him, I'm doing it, and the next thing I know, he's on my back.
Yeah.
And I get out of it. I get out of it. And as I emerge and come up, he takes the armbar. And I thought, wow, that's when you're with somebody who's a top tier person. It's just so much fun. It's so much fun to work with people like that because your mind starts exploring. And then what I kind of do in my brain is I think about my transitions on grips, and I think, okay, how can I take that transition, put it back to the Sinawali's? Because if you start to look at wrist control, right, you got to have a cross, right? So your forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand. If you start to think of forehand on the elbow and your backhand can be here, you start to have a throw that operates like that. If they escape out of it, you got a backhand here, and then you have that switch out. So if you do that backhand, I start to kind of replay things in my head. And I'll start to go, okay, if I'm on Sinawali number 6, and I go backhand, forehand, I'm here in this position we're playing, and I bring this up, I get you thinking that my left hand's coming in, my right hand goes to that drag. And then I start to get the arm drag that way. So it's just kind of my own way of, I don't know how right that is. No one's ever told me that's one thing or the other. But that's kind of how I start to play with Sinawalis so that it keeps my mind sharp. Because I think part of what makes Sinawalis such a special thing is that it's the one thing I've experienced where if you show Sinawali to a boxer or a wrestler, or you show it to somebody who's a judo guy, jiu-jitsu guy, they all start to look and go, hey, there's something in that.
Yeah.
There's something in that. I was working, one of my colleagues is a wrestling coach, and we were hanging out in my room, and he was showing me some wrestling stuff. So I started going, hey, let's play with the grips. And all of a sudden, my hands started moving through, and he goes, how are you able to move your hands like that? And I go, well, it's this thing I do. And I start showing him hoopla, and he goes, oh, that's cool. And he goes, well, first time I saw it, I thought it was dumb, but now that I've seen it, I think I might want to learn that. Because it's about, like to me, what I always think is fascinating is when you can take something and put it in different contexts and it still shines.
Yes.
Part of what makes Muhammad Ali great as a boxer, not to switch subjects really quick, but part of what makes him great isn't just that he's good, it's who he fought. He fought Joe Frazier. He fought Ken. He fought George Chuvalo. He fought great fighters, and he came out on top. And he didn't always win. He You didn't always win, but you came out on top. But greatness is who you kind of rub up against. It's like, would Michael Jordan be great without losing to the Detroit Pistons?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kinds of things I look at, and I think when you're studying Sinawali's this way, and you look and say, okay, I like Sinawali's. Let me take it a little bit deeper. Let me see if I can put this into a boxing context. I think it's great. Then when you want to put it into judo and the grip fighting and randori. Then it becomes really like if I want to set up like my koshi garuma, which is Japanese for hip throw. I got a forehand here and a forehand here. And if you look at that open Sinawali drill, we go 3-4, or we go 4 forehands to another forehand. You're working on that forehand rhythm, and it starts to chamber. So if I want to set up that koshi garuma, I got to have that same kind of coordination down. So I start kind of looking at my game that way, and I always tell myself, I didn't lose. I just messed it up. I found a mistake. I got to go back and find the mistakes in the grip fighting. So it's just something yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Matt. Oh,
no problem.
So at Affinity in our AIM program, we're trying to like boil things down, and a lot of it has to do with just routes.
Yeah.
Whether what weapon it is, it's going to be in a route, and we learn to respond to the route first, right? Hook. But in my mind, as much as I preach this, I never once thought of it with grip fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Right?
You're welcome.
Because when we find something that works on multiple planes, now my brain's not operating on, well, I have to learn this. It's, well, how can I use that to set up this? Right?
Yes.
Brother, that's huge. Good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we see it a lot, and we operate on that principle, but I never thought about it with the grip fighting. Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I am too. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's always a compliment when someone thinks that you're worth listening to, even if it's for 5 minutes. I appreciate that. And when you start to look at cross training and why people cross train, what I started to notice was if you put yourself in positions where you have to improve and you have to cross train, what I think starts to develop, you start to become more humble. Yeah. Because you start seeing that you might be really good in poly. You might be good in poly.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna do so good in no-gi jiu-jitsu. All of a sudden, because when I started doing judo, I was a blue belt. I thought, well, I got my blue belt in jiu-jitsu. I'll probably be able to hang in here. No, I'm not. Because the grip fighting's a different game. Because the grip fighting's different. It's different now. And so then when you do something like Muay Thai and you start to look at what happens with the plum in Muay Thai and why this elbow becomes so important, right? Mm-hmm. See this uppercut elbow becomes so important. Well, why is that? You got to keep your posture. If you let somebody break your posture, you're going to start eating knees, right?
Yeah, brother.
So then even like today, I was standing with somebody and we were doing no-gi, and we were going to go do no-gi and do stuff. And I could tell the guy wanted to grab my posture. And as he did, I kept bringing my elbow in, but instead of elbowing him directly, I was using my elbow as a frame. And I kept bringing it up, and I started framing off his body with my elbow that way. And I thought, oh man, I'm glad I've been practicing that. Yeah. It's like we usually sometimes think we translate things literally, and sometimes how we translate things into that application, it's going to vary based on those rule sets. That's something that I've started to learn. I remember I was working with Ann Wright, and she's at Grace United St. Louis with me, and she was teaching a throw, and it was one of the best examples of a sweep and a throw that I have ever heard. So I'm going to butcher her, but she'd be a great guest for it. She's a pretty cool person. And anyway, she was telling me, she goes, if you want to really get a sweep on somebody, you have to remember that you're a ball and you're making a ball, and your job is to be the bottom of the ball. And that's when I realized I've usually been falling like a box. I'm not falling like a ball, right? And I started to realize, like, why am I bringing people on top of me? I'm bringing them on top of me because I'm falling like a box. And that's a really hard thing to say to somebody who's working out with a lot of people, and I'm doing, and I'm doing lots of things, and I get cool privileges. And then I'm thinking to myself, at the most basic level, I'm screwing this up. And watching her do, because it used to baffle me how she could throw me and then she could sustain me in the air. And I was like, how are you doing that? Because she's about 100 pounds. I'm about 222.
Mm-hmm.
So by all practicality, when we say it's technique, that's correct. But on another level, it's also minorly dismissive because it's not looking at the specifics. You got to look at the specifics. You can't just dismiss something and say, oh, well, it's your technique. Yeah, with part of the technique. She's the bottom of that ball every single time. And the next thing it's almost like I'm floating. And then I noticed that's how she can handle me. Because when a 100-pound person can handle a 220-plus pound person, you got to examine it, right?
Yeah, that's martial arts. The beauty of true martial art right there, right?
Absolutely. 100%, right? It's like when you look at Cadena Real and you look at the contact point that it makes and you look at that movement that it's making around as soon as it cuts, you see a very similar movement in Japanese swordsmanship as well, that you'll see it when those blades crash. There's a cadena kind of moving when they meet on those angles. Because so many people are right-handed, that right forehand shot's going to be a problem for a lot of people with engagement.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem. So that the tighter and more cleaner you make that circle, the better off, you're more successful your technique's going to be. And so that study to me is just fascinating. I love learning it.
Yeah, brother. And this is probably it's a dumb question. I'm going to ask it anyway, right? Bringing it back. Do you think continually growing as a martial artist and doing other systems and going outside your comfort zone, because like you said, it does suck.
Yeah.
If you've been doing martial arts for a couple decades and all of a sudden you got some dude on top of you and you're like, oh, I wish I would have figured this out earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
I think, do you think it makes you a better teacher? Because then you're on the other side, and later on when you see a student struggling, you're like, oh, my heart goes out to you.
I think what happens with people, and I'm a big fan of kind of journaling and reflection, and part of that is because we live in a very privileged society in the United States. We live in a place where we get a lot of things available to us on a basic needs level. We get clean water in our houses almost across, universally. We have access to health and dental care, and so we start to kind of approach life with a lack of gratitude that I think comes off the wrong way. And so when you start to either become more physically fit, or when you start to either become more physically fit, become more capable in something, you start to forget what it was like to be that way. I remember a time, I tell a lot of my kids this story. I was in my grandmother used to visit a lot of her friends that weren't aging really well. Mm-hmm. And one of the people that she had visited very frequently was her friend named Odile, and they called her Odie, like Odie on the Garfield comics. Mm-hmm. So her room was in this downtown St. Louis. Is a pretty gothic looking building, but it's right next to the School of the Blind. And I remember we go there for her birthday party. She's turning, I think, 87 or 88. She was getting up there. And they had a birthday cake with the Odie dog on it from Garfield. It says, "Happy birthday, Odie." And I'm thinking, I can't wait to get into this cake. I'm like ready to rock and roll, right? And I remember when they said, "Blow out the candles," she looks at me and she goes, "Matt, blow the candles out." My grandma says, "No, don't blow the candles out." And she goes, "Matthew, you blow those candles out." So my grandmother gives me the nod to go ahead, and I blow the candle out for her. She looks at me. She looks at her group of friends and goes, "I wish I was dead." It says this in a real kind of salty, crusty way. But then what happened is that the party unfolded And like any party, they sit around the cake, they cut the cake, and then they divide into pairs to eat the cake. I noticed that she's by herself and she's looking out the window, she's smoking a cigarette. And I go and I look and I'm like, what is she looking at? And she's watching the track for the School of the Blind. And she's watching these kids try to run the track and using feelers and trying to walk up steps. And she's watching these teachers try to coach these kids through very simple things that you and I can do every day. And she's just staring with intensity. And she looks at me and she said, every one of those kids would cut their arm off to be able to see like you and me. And don't you ever forget it. Mm-hmm. What that taught me was that you can maybe be rude or be salty or be a certain way, but being humble and being grateful really teaches you a lot, you know? And so what I always remind myself when I get onto the mats is I think there's a lot of people that would love to have the opportunity to learn jiu-jitsu like I'm about to learn. I've had the privilege I've gotten to learn taking classes from Hoyler Gracie, from David Adeve, from Paulo Brandao to John Jack Machado. You know, I've been on the mats with Guru, and I think to myself, even if I've never tapped anybody, because I don't tap a lot of people, I just survive. I joke that I'm the Glass Joe of the
Me too, brother.
In the Mike Tyson's Punch Out, I'm the Glass Joe of the gym, and I'm okay with that. But I remind myself, so many people would love to have the opportunity to get on these mats and to learn how to do jiu-jitsu like I'm doing, and to share college, to share specifically Guru Asano's Kali with as many people as I get to work out with is a really special privilege. And I think part of what being a student teaches you is there was a time when you didn't know. And that, you know, and the farther you get away from that time, I think your mind starts to become complacent and think, hey, how come this guy can't get it? I've been doing this for 20 years. Why can't you get this? And we forget to ourselves, hey, hold on a second. Like, this is, you know, it takes time. Everyone's doing it for a reason, and you got to respect that with people.
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes when you're teaching beginners, or when I'm teaching beginners,
yeah,
quite often they'll have like a question and they're super cerebral in their question.
Yeah.
And I try to find the best way to address it, but at the same time, like, think about what Guru Asano, like everything we talked about, all the neat Sinawali stuff, Guru refers to as coordination exercises.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you first start, you're like, that's a combination. That's badass.
Right.
But then you say, well, no. I'm just trying to get my stick from my right side to my left side. Right? As quick, you know, right? And how many ways can it happen? Right. So sometimes I'm almost quick to dismiss the bigger question in lieu of trying to simplify it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you deal with that piece, Matt? Does that make sense? Did you understand what?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. What I try to do when I get questions and I teach people, and again, like I say, I usually say I work out with people because I'm always learning something.
Mm-hmm.
Try to kind of find out what kind of learner are they, because you get learners that are often nonverbal. You get some nonverbal people. You get more nonverbal people than you think. And believe it or not, I'm actually kind of a nonverbal learner. Okay. So when people start breaking down techniques to me, I'm just going, I start falling asleep. I was like, because I don't have my hands on it. I was a very tactile child. So I wanted, I used to take my toys. I'd take a little screwdriver. I'd take my toys apart and put back together, because it was always interesting to me to see kind of how things worked. That was always fast. But then I started to notice when you teach certain people, some people really need you to verbally express something.
Yeah.
Some people need to visually see it. So what I always do is I do a tool that I stole from Chris Voss, he's an FBI agent that does the on method. He wrote the book Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
But he talks about summarizing what somebody says and labeling and identifying the problem, because that almost demystifies what's happening to people.
Okay.
And that just kind of demystifies what's happening to them. So when somebody gets like that and they've got like a question, they get like really cerebral with them, I try to restate that question so they know that I've heard it. This way their brain starts to go, okay, this guy heard what I actually said and thought about it. When somebody feels heard, then they're going to hear you. I found that for the most part in teaching young people and kids. Taking the time to summarize somebody's question is important because listening is an active skill.
Yes, sir.
If you're listening so that you have your turn to talk, that's different than listening to restate what somebody said.
Mm-hmm.
So then what I do, that's my first big tool that I do. I restate the question, and then I usually get them to go, oh, that's right. Then I try to put it into the simplest ways that I can. Because some people, you get some people who they really need that cerebral portion of it. Because some people, like I remember a kid talking to me one time, and it was so fascinating. He was reading Dune, and this was a kid who was very much academically. He academically did not shine because he didn't find the value in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what happened. This kid is reading Dune, and he goes, man, Mr. Stumpf, Dune is a fascinating social commentary. Now, this is a kid who's failing almost every class, but just use the term social commentary. And I go, where the heck did that come from? He goes, well, if you look at Arrakis is kind of like this because the need to control spice is like our need to control oil in the Middle East. Huh. It's fascinating how the Atreides are addressing this issue. Because now he finds value in the stories and the books. That's why he's doing it. Same kid. I remember teaching him how to play chess. Same kid. He goes, I don't want to play chess. Chess is stupid. And I said, and I'm working with him. I get him to play chess. I teach him a few basic openings. I start beating him. I'm beating him every day. All of a sudden, one day he comes in. He starts beating me all the time. Never beat this kid again. After 8 games, this kid came back. He starts smoking me. And I go, what are you doing? He goes, well, what I did is I found out, Mr. Stumpf, he goes, there's a lot of cheap chess games out there on the computer. There's a lot of chess games. So I just play every day. I play 5 games. And I pretty much know how to handle your Indian opening here. He goes, you're pretty much going to open up with a pawn to develop a knight. I'm going to neutralize them here and here. You're going to move your queen's rook over because you think that's going to stop me from castling. So I'm going to address by this. He goes, you're a pretty basic player, Mr. Stumpf. I'm sorry. Snap. But where that was a good experience for me is it taught me that kid but that kid is a real cerebral kid. That kid was a super cerebral kid. Mm-hmm. But I had to kind of learn to let him do it at his pace. So I actually taught the same kid Sinawali, and once he saw what it was, he was in. But when he didn't see what it was real hard for him. So, yeah.
No, I appreciate that story, man. So, and what I heard in that, and it's kind of something it's been revolving around in quite a few of our shows. I talk to instructors, but as much as it's important for us to guide the class and provide information, we need to specialize on how to zero in to listen.
Yeah,
because that's something that. The first level, and maybe this is just me. I didn't do martial arts as a child, okay?
All right.
And so I didn't have that, and then later trying to provide that when you never had that was was something that was just quite different. So as a teacher, I thought my job was to describe everything and then to do it and all those things, which is like the basic level of it.
Absolutely.
But then later, after I screwed everything up a bunch, and I was able to see, like, when I did it like this, then this kid got it. When we did it like this, then this kid got it. When we did it like this, 8 out of 10 kids got it. Right? And so being able to go through, almost following the acronym from Guru Rek, research, explore, create.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So being able to listen to your students is really, really important.
Well, especially too because you find you get some people that you'll work with, they have a wide variety of needs. If you get somebody who's a police officer, You're going to have a different set of needs than somebody who is a woman concerned with self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
They're two totally different things. It's something that Tommy and I would do this all the time. I would teach. I love going into martial arts schools and asking people why they do stuff. And then I love when people don't know what I do and I'm on the mats and I don't know that they don't know that I work out with people and they think I'm just there to learn, which I am obviously. But I'll talk to them like, well, why are you doing jujitsu? And it's fascinating to see people offer to me the wide range of depth as to why they do it. And things can range from I've had people tell me that they're struggling with substance abuse and depression. That's a major theme, more common than people think. And I think that that's a very good reason. I think that's a good reason to train. It's a great reason to have something to occupy your brain. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons why, Taekwondo and boxing and that competition really appealed to me at a certain point in my life because I was a kid that didn't do good with organized sports. And I had a father who was very successful in those types of sports. And so that really had an impact on me because I never ever feel like I was quite good enough. So then, and I remember the first fight that I won, and the guy quit on his stool. He didn't answer the bell for the third round, and I was just kind of in shock that I had won. I hadn't won anything. I had lost. I think I lost about 6 or 7, fights in a row, and so I was very close to quitting. And I remember they had the bell the third round, and he didn't answer the bell. And I looked at Sean, and I said, I'm shocked. And he looks at me and goes, I'm not. He said, you worked hard and you outfought him. He said, you did the work and he didn't. And he said, and when the bell rang, he found out that he didn't do the work. That's what he found out. I thought it just got a different idea in me in the work ethic. And so I think what happens is because I was a kid who came to those sports really for confidence. And so I needed to see that I could do the hard things. But there were some people that were in the same class just for weight loss, improve flexibility. Some people are there to kind of expand that circle and do something different because, we live in a world now where kids socialize through phones. Like I remember telling a group of kids, I was teaching ISS and I shared with a group of kids how when you would date in college, how going to Blockbuster and then getting food was a date. And they would go, what's a Blockbuster? You have to explain what a video rental store was and how it worked. And the kids would just laugh. They're laughing at me. But you realize, they don't have that. They didn't grow up with this. It's the same thing like when I remember calling the first time. I still remember the first time I ever called a girl on the phone. I still remember it. And I was just like nerve-wracked, and her father picks up and he's like, hello. He says it real, firm, and I sound like some squeaky teenager out of is Heather there, sir? Like one day, and then when he says his next response is, who are you? What job do you have? He's totally grilling me just to put a little bit of healthy fear into a teenager, and I understand and respect that. Makes sense. But then at the same time, we're losing that component because now it's real simple. We just send out a virtual message into the world. And we don't have to have those conversations, those phone calls anymore. We don't have to have those face-to-face, those one-on-ones. And so then what you find out is bullying still happens that way. But the biggest catch is the lack of confidence still happens that way. And people don't always know how to share that. They don't always know how to share that they're struggling or how to share that something hurt their feelings. They might not always know how to establish a boundary. And so I think coming into martial arts, one of the best things that you learn that I learned with my class when I had my ACT lab and the kids would teach each other when they'd come in is they were really big on their respect. Meaning if you want us to accept you into Mr. Stumpf's ACT lab, you got to be able to put forth the effort. And the kids were nicer. I had some kids who were not particularly always the nicest people were not for teaching that. And because they saw like, okay, this kid's doing a rite of passage. And, we would talk a lot about etiquette and a lot about decorum. I mean, any kind of fighting or conflict is all about respect and sportsmanship, right? I mean, that's what that is. why we bow when we get on and off the mats. That's why we salute when we do it. We're showing a mutual respect because we're being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the risk, even being on here. I might, talk about Sinawali, helping you with your underarm. Somebody's gonna be like, Stumpf doesn't always talk about that guy's an idiot. You know what I'm saying? There's that risk involved. Somebody might look at that and say, I cannot believe that Matt Stumpf said this. This is completely ridiculous. That's a risk that I've got to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they got to be gutsy enough to at least give it a try, and be gutsy enough to at least, to at least put your information, your thoughts out there, and to do the work.
Mm-hmm. And to know that it's okay that if somebody says something, because you know what I mean, this podcast, especially in this case, this represents a small moment in time in Jamie and Matt's development. And hopefully 2 years from now, we'll have done another podcast and we might be like, hey,
hopefully, absolutely.
Well, maybe I was doing that reaching thing and it didn't work out, or maybe it did, Well,
and I think having the habit of taking action, to me, is what helps. There's something that Sean used to say all the time. He used to say, you got to take action, Matt. Action wins fights. And he used to say that to me constantly.
Yes.
He'd always be like, nobody wins a fight by being inactive. He would say that. And I remember one time I asked him, I go, how come we don't work on a lot of defense? And I remember he goes, name one fighter that ever won a fight playing defense. And I think I can't remember who it was. It might be either Henry Grepp or Charlie Burley, some old school fighter that he won a fight. He won a round, not a fight. He won a round playing defense. And Sean looked at me and goes, go run a mile. He didn't say anything to me. Made me run a mile for making that comment. Okay, well, lesson learned. But the point they're making is you learn to respect your teacher. You learn to respect.
It's really funny. My jiu-jitsu instructor, he will mess around every once in a while and he'll be like, so Jamie, what are the ABCs of jiu-jitsu? And I'll be like, and he'll go, attack. B and C are for losers. Okay, attack. There's no B and C. That's your A, whatever it is. So that is the ABCs of jiu-jitsu.
That's so fun.
Yeah, and it helps to give a sense of urgency at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's fun because you see how it's about problem solving, and part of where I always found Guru and Asano fascinating as an individual, where he's a role model.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, it's the things he's done, and you look and you realize he had a purple belt in jiu-jitsu in the 90s.
Yes.
At a time when there wasn't a lot of it, and he was out there doing stuff with it, and he started in his late 50s, early 60s, and you realize how vulnerable he was doing that. And then when you visit the Asano Academy and you see all his instructor certs, and you realize that's almost every time he just started at ground zero. When he tries something new, he's gonna go research something else. And so, I remind myself of that. Even if you're trying a new food, it's a basic risk. It's a very, very basic risk. And that's a very, very basic risk. And when you do that, you find out something a little bit about yourself, and you find out you can do the hard thing, and you find out that you're tougher than you think, and you find out that, maybe you made a mistake, but you had more guts than the person who stayed at home. Yeah. And usually people who stayed at home that have their opinions, that's usually been what I have found, because you see how much work it takes to maintain your notes, to continue to share information if you want to stay relevant. The need for cross-training in our community, I think, is very, very high. A lot of people need to do it. Guru Lanero is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So Clark, those guys cross-train and do stuff at such neat levels. And if you notice, they don't really badmouth a whole lot anybody. No. I kind of noticed that the real big outliers, or really good guys, aren't really. They might have a beef or something, but they really don't badmouth. They get out there, they do their best. They're like, oh, you want me to learn Muay Thai? Okay, I'm gonna go learn it. You want me to learn Jiu-Jitsu? I'm gonna go learn it. To me, I think that's one of the most fascinating dynamics of our community that I think is really special.
Me too. Right? Yeah. I mean, you have opinions and then you have experience, right? And opinions and experience are two different things. And there's some stuff, like I'll tell our students, like, we're going to have a martial arts experience. At the end of this experience, you might go, all I know is that I don't ever want to do that again. Right? That's okay. Right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
at being a part of our group, you will have felt it or whatever, or had that experience at time, and thank you for bringing
Yeah.
up that piece about Guru Anasano. Guru
Oh,
is Guru because of who he is and all those pieces, but we very rarely acknowledge how often he's put on the white belt,
yeah.
right? And so that is a thing that, like,
And think about how hard that must have been to be going in. And because I thought about it, because you know what, I still remember my first day of jujitsu. Because a part of me, I was kind of nervous about it. I was real nervous because you're going into a place you don't know anybody. You're worried about getting hurt. You're worried about that. Those were the big things I was worried about. And then once I got there, I felt pretty safe. But then you see how long it's going to take to get better. You're not gonna get this. You're not gonna learn 2 or 3 moves and then get a belt. And that's not how this is gonna work. Like, you're gonna spend some time in the meat grinder, and you realize how many times he did that in judo, shoot wrestling, and those are just the things we know about.
yeah,
I know that
exactly.
there's probably more beyond that. And then when you see his attitude towards things, I really do use that as a measuring stick for myself and say, okay, am I upset right now because of my own ego? And most of the time, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And so then okay, well, the most important thing, you go home, you stretch, you recover. I had to get a stretching coach, Katie Collins, and she's fantastic. I have because my schedule's pretty tight. It's I could only get 4 or 5 sessions with her. And she's just a fantastic coach, wonderful human being. And she was able to increase my hip flexibility by notable margins. So then when I went to the camp, I was able to kick it at a level more befitting than what I thought was able to do.
Yeah.
And man, that's such a neat, and you realize that's the kind of stuff Guru does. That's why Guru goes and does yoga. Right. That's why he's always looking at health and fitness things. And you realize that it's those small little bitty bits and decisions that help you get someplace. Everybody looks at the end product. We look at Michael Jordan doing this, but what you don't think about, how many times did Michael Jordan say no to the ice cream? How many times did Michael Jordan go to a stretching coach, a conditioning coach? It wasn't just, yes, obviously it's him when he put in the work, but how many things did he say no to improve his performance?
Almost and probably just as many things as he had to say yes to in order to train. Right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, you don't have to always like what you're doing. You have to like the results. And I think like the results of me doing judo, my C-lock got so much better.
Really?
Because I started working. Yeah, I started doing. I tell you that this is where C-lock is such a special art. It really is. It's very special. And I love doing it, and I've gotten to do it with so many amazing people that are a lot better than I am. But I've learned a lot doing jiu-jitsu and judo. I've learned a lot about the leveraging of C-lot and the groundwork of Harimau because I started working on myself with jiu-jitsu. And I think that journey for me was so important. I can never state too much how important those systems were to me and personally and what I do now.
Absolutely. And I think they add a lot of grit.
Yeah.
Right, and that's a piece of I don't know that essentially I think that's what a lot of our clients are coming to us for is for growth and grit and some other piece,
Yeah, well, people want to develop, they want to have that confidence, I think, when they walk down the street or just the trust in themselves. I see that a lot with like young people today where they don't always have the trust with themselves because they didn't learn how to prepare. I remember Sean used to say to me constantly, he said, when 2 people get into the ring, there's only one of them that's deserving to win. And you deserve to win because you did the work. And that's why you deserve this. And you're going to go in there and you're going to take it from this other guy and you're going to show him that he don't work as hard as you. And I remind that to myself all the time, that you're not getting things because you're good. You're getting things because you worked and you outworked those other people. And when you start thinking about it in those terms, that's why I kind of trigger a different part of my brain. And I think being a white belt in jiu-jitsu helped me do that. Being a white belt in judo helped me do that, because it made me get a little grittier again, because I had to say, okay, you're going to make a commitment. I remember thinking to myself, I'm just going to stay till I get a stripe on my white belt, because it's hard. It's really hard to do, right? And then I get one. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay until I get 2 stripes, and then it's like because it's so hard to see the idea of when you're that bad at something, seeing all the way to purple belt. And then that there's stuff beyond that. And the same thing in Guru and Asano's work. I mean, I remember the first time we were doing Pal Sup Panastas, and I learned that for the first time, and I'm at the training camp, and I remember asking Cookie for help. And she was so gracious and incredibly kind and giving, and helped me do the strokes. I hadn't done it before. And if you would have told me then that I'd be able to be showing that with people and working with different clientele and being able to share that, I wouldn't have believed it. Well, it took a lot of work. And the biggest thing was it took just 2 minutes a day. You start with 2 minutes a day, work on those basic movements. If every single day you commit to your brain, you're going to do 2 minutes of Sinawali, your knowledge of Sinawali is going to improve. It has to improve. You take 2 minutes a day and write out those notes. Work on your notes every day, even if you don't think you already know it. Work on them again. You start to grow, and I a lot of those experiences. Brother,
this brings me to the point where usually I ask about advice that you could give to a martial arts student. Somebody that they could, something that maybe they're relatively new, and something that seems accessible to them.
I think the advice I would give is always set a goal for yourself every week. And that goal could just be showing up, because sometimes it's hard to show up. I ran into one of my old jiu-jitsu partners. I took myself out to eat, and I ran into him at the restaurant, and I just got my blue belt. And he saw me and he goes, hey. And to be honest with me, he was as good as I was. Wasn't any better, wasn't any worse. And he goes, hey, are you still going up to jiu-jitsu? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I quit. And I go, yeah, we missed you up there. I hadn't seen you. And he goes, yeah, I just didn't have what it takes. And I said, I think you do have what it takes. And you could tell he had failed so many times that he didn't even want to just show up. And I think that for a lot of people, I think you got to be there for yourself first. And so I think that looks like, even if the goal is just do the rep, do 10 Sinawali's. That's awesome. Do a forehand, backhand, do an Ekis. That's going to change something. That's going to do a lot for you.
Brother, I really like that, because it seems doable, right? Yeah. You give yourself a doable goal by the end of the week, not something that's insane. Right, yes. I'm not going to be floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee at the end of my 7 days.
You're not going to fight tomorrow, hopefully.
Exactly, right? But maybe I could be slightly lighter on my feet.
Exactly. Do your footwork for 2 minutes.
Yeah, brother.
Do your footwork for 2 minutes. See what's going to happen. You're going to improve.
Another thing I wanted to ask is,
yeah, of course.
First of all, would you like to come back and talk to us again? I really enjoyed this.
I would love to. Absolutely. It'd be great.
Great. So I will have you recommend somebody. Okay. Right. But I'm going to have you back. I really enjoyed this, Matt. This is
great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll let you know. Yeah, I know a lot of people that think it'd be great for the podcast. I really like the format. I thought it was really nice.
Yeah. We have lots of fun with it, and I don't know. Martial arts is one of the only things that ever made sense to me as a learner.
Yeah.
I didn't graduate high school. I got a GED. I didn't go to college. I didn't do anything. And my first martial arts teacher, Steve Fristo, and you probably knew him from the St. Louis area. He's a tall gentleman, and he was visually impaired, and he had white hair, and that was my first teacher.
So were you in this area, or did he move up to where you were at?
We were in Springfield, Illinois. That's where I grew up.
And what art was he teaching?
He did the Filipino martial art at Kali, and he did JKD, and he did Silat. His name is Steve Fristo.
I saw him at a guru seminar back in '96.
Yeah.
This real tall guy. He walked with a thing, didn't he?
Yeah.
I know exactly who that was. Your first instructor.
That's my guru before I was able to be with Guru Dan, and he
Wow.
just amazing, just amazing. And so if I hadn't met him at the time I met him, my life would be very different right now,
Yeah.
and I'm absolutely positive of that.
It's almost like they meet you at that fork, and it's like I think sometimes things open up for us at the right time. I know Sean Becker had that impact on me. I think I would have probably my life would have had a different outcome. I think.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
coming back to what you said earlier, having folks sometimes come back and tell us how we helped them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not always like the same way or exactly the same way I might have thought I helped.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what the FormABLE moments, that's what the FormABLE podcast is all about. And we can't wait to have you back on the show once again.
Would love that opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, brother. So once again, this is Jamie Sparling with Affinity Martial Arts and Wellness, Wausau, Wisconsin. I am with Guru Matt Stumpf of Applied Combatives Group in St. Louis. This has been the FormABLE Podcast. Please like, subscribe, leave us a comment, ask us a question, and we'll do our best. And I will have Guru Matt back at some point. So if you have any questions for him, throw it in the comments and be nice. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.